Hello and welcome to another Steelers Depot live stream here on this Monday. I am Alex Kozora. Joining me, as always, is Bryan here for the next hour to answer your Steelers questions as we are in the dead of the offseason here in late June. Appreciate you guys being here. Dave and I will be here till 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You can send us your questions, what's on your mind here in this offseason. Still some things happening, really more last week than this week so far for Pittsburgh, but you never know what the news cycle might provide. So appreciate you guys being here. Dave, how you doing?
I am doing well on this Monday. Should be an exciting sports night. Got the College World Series going on tonight and Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. I will be tuned in for that for sure. While people come into the chat here, who do you have tonight in the Stanley Cup Final? Florida, Edmonton, or you do not care?
I do care, and I'm going to go Edmonton. My guess is very much a guess, but I will go with the Oilers completing the reverse sweep. Where are you at in chat? Let us know who you taking. You taking Florida or Edmonton tonight?
Yeah, I am rooting for Florida, but I am with you in thinking that Edmonton will do the unthinkable tonight.
Yeah, it's been a heck of a comeback, and Connor McDavid just playing out of his mind. But we'll transition to Steelers talk, and speaking of which, you see on screen right now a great article that Dave wrote this afternoon laying out the case for a fair market value extension for Najee Harris and what he's done to deserve it. So give that a read. It's a really good in-depth, thorough look at the Najee Harris situation. I'm sure we'll get some questions and we'll talk about that. If you guys could like the stream, would appreciate that. Want to remind you guys, you can send in super chats to have your question be guaranteed to be asked and answered and move to the front of the line. No obligation, but we always appreciate it the same. Podcast schedule, no podcast on Monday. We're on Tuesdays and Fridays until training camp starts up, barring anything breaking happens. And of course, we'll do an emergency episode. So just a heads up on a little logistics of the site and the podcast right now. But we will jump right into our friend Mike Adesso and his question. He says, building off of Ross's terrible take today, which was on Pittsburgh's outside linebackers facing a bunch of rookie tackles this season. Mike says, which position group do you think is number one as we sit here today? You know, my thoughts on outside linebacker depth, so I politely disagree. I actually think it's inside linebacker, which is wild to type. Dave, I'll let you start this off. What position group on Pittsburgh right now is the strongest unit overall?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I understand why you go with the inside linebacker group, and I'm as excited about as anyone when it comes to Peyton Wilson and where his potential fit will be in all this. And obviously, they went out and got Patrick Queen, and we saw what Landon Roberts did last year, and the hope is obviously Cole Holcomb comes back at some point, maybe start of the season, maybe a couple weeks into the season there. Man, I mean, outside linebacker, you got your top two obviously in TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. Really was impressed with what Nick Herbig was able to do during his rookie season in those limited snaps, and very impactful. And I thought he represented himself well in other areas, like against the run. And yeah, it was a small sample size, but for someone that we both had our kind of doubts about after he was drafted due to the whole measurable aspect of it, man, I thought he really represented himself well with a year underneath his belt now and knows what to expect. And you're going to be a lot more comfortable in that defense. And then you go out and we'll see how the fourth linebacker, outside linebacker spot shapes out. Will it be a guy like Jeremiah Moon, who I really thought that was kind of regardless if he sticks or not, a shrewd move on the part of the Steelers late last season to claim him off waivers so they could get a good long look at him this summer. Guess that's a long way of saying that I really like this outside linebacker depth chart.
I do too. I think Herbig's in for a big year too. You see him training right now with Cam Heyward, Keanu Benton, the pass rush specialist, Des Walker this offseason. I like Moon as a number 4. And even mentioned Kyron Johnson, who finished the year with Pittsburgh. Not super high on him, but does have some experience and played on special teams. I do think Mike's suggestion of inside linebacker is really good overall. It's right there. It may surpass even outside linebacker if all these guys meet expectations. Just a little bit unknown when it comes to a Peyton Wilson, obviously being a rookie. Patrick Queen away from Roquan Smith, and the status and health of Cole Holcomb seems more optimistic, but a little still unsure of when his return and what that play will look like, more importantly, coming off the knee injury. What about running back with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, Patterson? Yeah. What do you think?
What kind of discussion could you, what kind of argument could you make, to enter the running back position into that conversation? Obviously, Najee and Jalen Warren and Cordell Patterson now in that room. And I mean, you got a couple of guys that, obviously not everybody's going to, it might just be those three and those three alone, but got a couple of experienced guys in, who was it? Ward and P. Ryan. Mm-hmm. And you got the rookie Edwards out of Georgia, who, you look at his tape, he's a little bit undersized, but man, he's got some cutting ability and
a little Warren feel to his game.
Yeah. You remember a couple of years ago, we were, who was the other running back that year out of who was it?
Mateo Durant.
Yeah, Mateo. A lot of, at least the initial thoughts, or at least my thoughts coming out of the undrafted free agent class was, hey, maybe that Durant might be something to watch there. And he didn't last hardly any time on the roster. And then you fast forward, and Jalen Warren had the summer and the camp and the preseason that he had, and the rest is history, as they say. So I think you would have to at least listen to somebody's argument when it comes to the running back room right now.
There's a case to be made. You just might lack some of the elite top end talent that outside linebacker has, what inside linebacker could potentially have. But I think it's in the conversation. Guard, could that be with, say, Malu, Daniels, Herbig, McCormick as your 4, Spencer Anderson as well? Probably not your front runner, but I think maybe pushing for a podium spot.
Yeah. That you could have a conversation about it, at least, that position group.
So good conversation overall. Good question, Mike. We got Joey Jr., I assume not Porter, but he says, I finally get to listen to, where I just lost the place there. Finally get to listen in on a live chat driving to Austin, Texas right now. What's up, David and Alex? Thank you, Joey Jr., for listening. Safe travels. Yeah,
be careful out there.
For sure. Got our friend here, Quality Colos, with a $5 super chat, says, thanks for all you do, Steelers Depot team, Dave and Alex. Thank you, man. We appreciate you always being here on these live streams and the generous super chat. All right, back to the questions here, and Caleb confirming podcast tomorrow. Yep, podcast tomorrow and on Friday. Terrible Take every day at 5 p.m. Eastern time. We got a bunch of guys here. Mr. Tummy, we got Infinity here, Joshua, AJC, Patrick, Donovan, Steel Pastor, and a whole bunch of others. Blackjack Novak says, Alex, you should audition for the Steelers play-by-play radio announcer. You would be great at it. I promise no one wants to listen to my voice for that long. I got the face for radio and the voice for newspaper, but appreciate the comment. It is interesting. We don't know who's calling games for Pittsburgh this year after Bill Hillgrove retired.
Yeah, not a lot of talk about that other than, the main name out there, I think, is Rob King at this point. Haven't really even heard too many other names thrown around.
They had posted the job listing on Teamwork Online a couple months ago. They've since taken it down. So I assume we should hear pretty soon. We got a preseason game in 6 weeks, 7 weeks. And so probably we'll get an answer here maybe right after the 4th of July. But yeah, that will be something to certainly note. All right, let's see. Next question comes from Patrick Donovan, who says, what would you all say is the most underrated signing we've had this offseason? I say the punter, Cameron Johnston. And Patrick, I'm right there with you. I think that was, just pound for pound, not considering, obviously, Johnston won't be hopefully as impactful as a Patrick Queen or somebody else. But I think pound for pound to get a veteran established punter was the best decision they made this entire offseason.
Oh, yeah, especially at the price, too. You come off the last several seasons, and really, the last several seasons overall with the inconsistencies this team has had in when it comes to the punting and all like that. You go out and get, arguably one of the top punters in free agency this year. It didn't strap you cap-wise and everything related to that. And obviously you hope this team's not having to punt a lot. But key situations, the thing about Presley Harvin III was, is it third or second? I've already forgot. Yeah. I've already forgotten how many, what number he was. You get that rocket, you get that bomb from him every once in a while, but very inconsistent, and especially down deep in your own end. It seemed like every time you needed a key punt, a key situation, he couldn't deliver it. And I think the big buzzword coming out of the last several seasons when it comes to him was just inconsistency. And if they can just get more consistency with a guy like Cameron Johnston, you could maybe flip a couple of fields and make some differences in some tight ball games. So hard to argue with somebody naming the punter in that situation.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Patrick. But a lot of other good moves to talk about. And if you want to throw in he says signing, not draft picks, but in terms of the signing, underrated. I mean, after the first kind of flurry of Queen, Johnston, and Wilson, they made a bunch of signings, but it got pretty quiet pretty quickly in terms of true free agent additions. So I think Johnston might be the leader to answer that question from an underrated aspect. Steel Pastor says the two weakest position groups. So Mike Adesso said, what's the strongest group? What are the two weakest ones? I think receiver, we'd all probably agree, would be one of those two and lessen until they find, a trade target out there. Would you agree with that, Dave? And then what else would you add to that slot?
Yeah, everybody should know how I feel about the wide receiver room at this point. I sure wish, it sure seems like it's one short at this point. I mean, yeah, they went out and added a lot of veteran type guys that have played in the NFL, like Watkins and Van Jefferson and Scotty Miller and Marquez Callaway. But and then you kind of wonder. You have seen some decent things from Calvin Austin so far, but he's still got more to prove, in my opinion. You go out and you draft a guy like Roman Wilson, who I think has the opportunity to be a successful wide receiver in the NFL. I think there's going to be growing pains along the way for him. George Pickens, I mean, it's really just George Pickens and everybody else at this point. And the bottom end of the depth chart could go several different ways at this point. So I think it's easy for you to name wide receiver as the weakest group as we sit here today. Who would be the next weakest position group at this point?
That's a more interesting question, I think, because I think everyone would say receivers in at least the bottom two. Would you go corner, safety, D-line? Am I missing something?
I mean, as far as depth goes, I mean, you got Joey. I mean, we know a lot about Dante Jackson in another uniform, but we don't know a lot about Dante Jackson in a Steelers uniform yet, and that's going to be determined, obviously, we get through the offseason. You got a lot of guys with potential, and obviously, Trice and Rush, but even those guys have got a lot. They got to make the roster, a lot to prove there. So then you bring back a guy like Cameron Sutton, and we'll have to see how that plays out with the legal situation with him. Are you going to have him, first couple weeks of the season? Might you have to wait even longer than that? I mean, obviously, you think what he can provide you in the slot, but really at this point, it is just, it's Joey Porter Jr., and you wait to see how the rest of the room shapes out.
So would you put corner as a weaker group? It's more, there's more weakness there at corner than safety or D-line. Is that your assessment?
Yeah, I think you could survive. I just because some of the experience that you have in that safety room, I feel a lot more comfortable with that position group than I do corner.
I'm with you. I'll say corner's the second weakest. I love Porter. I think I'm as high on Joey Porter Jr. in his second year as probably anybody that you'll meet. Beyond that, it's a lot of question marks. Dante Jackson, will he be consistent enough in Pittsburgh? Who are your backup guys? You got young guys in Rush and Trice and what they're going to offer. There's some promise, as you said, potential, but not quite sure. Will Cam Sutton be eligible to play week one? No idea. If not, who's your starting slot corner? Completely wide open. So that's a direction I would go in. Good question overall. I would say receiver and corner are your two weakest spots. All right, next question. We appreciate everybody here. Be sure to like this stream as well and subscribe to the channel and check out the site, SteelersDepot.com. Got a lot of great content for you guys to get us through the offseason. Let's see. Joey Jr. says, why hasn't anybody talked about Jaylen Warren? Batman is the heart and soul of the run game. I'm not sure exactly what that reference is. I think a lot of people appreciate and recognize Jaylen Warren in a lot of ways, more so than even Najee Harris. Maybe from a contractual standpoint, some might be wondering, could there be any chance on Warren getting a deal this summer? Dave, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, look, we talked a lot about, Jaylen during the season. I mean, he's an important piece to that running back room. I think he's done more than expected. We even said at the top of the show, I mean, coming out as an undrafted free agent, I probably would in those initial weeks right after the draft, I would have bet against Jaylen Warren even making the 53-man roster. Sure. And here we are a couple of years later. I mean, we've seen all that he can do. Boy, I mean, just what that guy does in certain situations of games with the ball in his hand, whether it be as a receiver or obviously as a running back, and even late in games in which the Steelers have been the writing was on the wall that they're probably going to lose the game. He still has that effort there. So, no, I don't think people are discounting him altogether. I think he makes a perfect compliment to Najee Harris. The thing about a potential extension with him, yes, he is eligible, being a former undrafted free agent, to get an extension. But the Steelers do, in essence, have him capped for the next couple of years, because even if they go about the process, let's say they don't give him an extension this offseason, and let's say they get in a situation where they have to put a second round tender on him next offseason as a restricted free agent. I mean, you're capping his earnings on what he can earn, what he's set to earn this year, and then what a second round tender would be next year. So you've got him by the short curlies, if you will there. So unless they were to blow his doors off with a deal, which there would really be no reason to with a guy that you have complete control over for the next 2 years, it's very unlikely to get a deal done unless that deal slants favorably, really favored on the Steelers side of things. I think a more realistic scenario with Jaylen Warren is a year from now, and obviously, depending on how he plays in 2024, and obviously depending on how this thing, ultimately shakes out with Najee Harris. Mm-hmm. But you could get in a situation where you give Jaylen Warren a second round tender early next offseason, and then you work off of a deal related to that. So I think in reality, it's probably not in Jaylen's best interest to even sign a deal at this point, because the Steelers have control over kind of the ceiling of what that can be at this point. So in essence, I think it's in his best interest to just play out 2024 and then see where the cards go from there, and then hope he gets in a situation where the Steelers want to extend him after restricted tendering him next year.
It's a little like Alejandro Villanueva, who had signed that long-term deal when he didn't have a ton of leverage and probably cost himself quite a bit of money. Had he waited and just played out his contract, he probably would have earned a whole lot more as a starting left tackle in the NFL. So I see some similarity there. I don't want to spend too much time on the topic because we talked about it a ton at length, and go check out the Friday podcast for our thoughts on the Najee Harris situation. Let me ask you two questions, though, Dave. A, do you think Pittsburgh hypothetically would have an appetite to pay both Najee Harris, let's say this year, and Jaylen Warren next year on long-term deals? And B, is a potential reason that they would not extend Najee be because they anticipate and would rather pay Jaylen Warren next year? Is that a plausible thought?
I mean, I think that the last question that you asked, I think it's totally plausible that, there's no intention at all of paying. It's potentially possible for them not to want to pay Najee the kind of money that he might be seeking this offseason as part of a extension. On top of that, though, I mean, you might get in a situation where, where you might just want to maintain control over over Jaylen after giving him the second round tender, because remember, it's only a restricted tender. Mm-hmm. And then he would be unrestricted off of that. And then obviously, you don't want to have the franchise tag to come in play. It's more when it comes to running backs overall. It's more of just a negotiating weapon overall, I believe, especially when it comes to the Steelers there. So, but you remember, and could they from an economical and cap and cash standpoint realistically sign both these guys, Najee this offseason and Jalen next offseason? Yes. I mean, you're not talking about break the bank type of deals, and
Sure.
you're not talking about guaranteed money with either one of those guys past the first season. Look, in no way, shape, or form is it obviously guaranteed that Najee's going to get a deal this offseason. But even if something like that does wind up happening, it's probably not going to be guaranteed money past 2024. The initial cash outlay is probably only going to be around $10 to $11 million at most. And then, if you needed to cut bait with him for whatever reason after 2024, you could, and then you could still go after and attack Jalen either way at that point. Does that answer your question?
Well, I agree that economically they could do it. The question to me is more philosophically. I think the point is we're going to learn a lot about how they value and view the running back position longer term under Omar Khan, because Najee Harris was drafted in the Kevin Colbert era in 2021. So we're going to get a feel for how old school is this team. The offense is being built old school, offensive line, run game, play action, pass. But in terms of how they pay the position, will it be the old school model or will it be the new school model of don't pay the position? I'm very curious to see which way this team goes.
Yeah, they might just be team fungible,
Yeah, right. Or they could be team old school and we'll pay the running backs and we'll just pay good people and keep the core intact. It could go either way. And so very interested the next, essentially till March. We'll see how this team's approach is and go from there.
Yeah, what's the running back market going to be a year from now?
Good question. As you mentioned Friday, Travis Etienne might get paid at some point here. I'm not sure who else might be in line after that, but it'll probably up. The market's getting a little hotter. It's still depressed compared to other positions, but it's increased from deals this offseason by Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley and McCaffrey getting his new deal. All right, so long discussion there, but appreciate the question. It's a good thought, and we'll certainly continue to have it. Probably touch on these things in Tuesday's podcast. We'll go back to the questions here. We got Sir Leviticus here. He made it, so I want to shout him out for being with us in the chat and all you guys being here. But Demetrius McNeil says, any chance James Daniels gets traded, then Spencer Anderson, Nate Herbig battle for right guard? Would have to throw in Mason McCormick as well. He's not getting extended, it doesn't sound like, but I don't think a trade is a very likely outcome.
Yeah, you would have to get, here's the thing with him, too. He's in the final year of his current contract, set to earn $8.25 million. You know what you have in him. He's battle tested. What would you do if you did indeed trade him? I mean, it would obviously something like that for it to be plausible. It'd have to come on the heels of, a guy like, McCormick just having a fantastic camp. But even so, what is your depth behind that at that point? This is not a team that's notorious for signing guys like him and then, investing that kind of money and then turning around and dumping them in the final year of the contract. They generally hold on to those guys. Now, obviously, I think, we're seeing, at least according to reports on him, that they're not interested in, they don't love him enough to extend him this offseason.
Right.
And he's still got some youth on his side. But on the flip side, too, if he plays out his current deal and hopefully it's his best season to date, and if that's the case and he flies the coop and goes into unrestricted free agency and signs elsewhere, you would have to root for him to be one of those guards that got, the guard tax, if you will, because a lot of those guards got paid this offseason in free agency, and I think you're going to see that continue next year. And if that happens, obviously that's going to add, to your compensatory draft pick tally sheet on your side on top of it there. So long story short, I would be absolutely shocked if they traded James Daniels.
I would as well. Cody in the chat makes the point you might be starting three rookies. If you trade Daniels, that'd be true. If McCormick starts, you could still have Herbig start and have a veteran in there, but it'd still be a greener group overall. Just quickly, and I think you answered my question. I've talked about it some. Why do you think this team, according to the reports, is just so dead set against even entertaining the idea of an extension with James Daniels? Is it because the guard market just got way too hot to double his salary, essentially?
I think that could be part of it, and I think too with them, if you look at what's one of Daniel's weaknesses of his game at this point? He's a better in my opinion, he's a better pass protector than he is a run blocker.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't necessarily quite fit the ethos of like the mauling run blocker. This team has been sort of collecting big, physical, athletic guys. He's a good athlete. I think he's a good player. I'm a James Daniels fan, but he's probably not quite that mold of like super strong and super physical and nasty.
He's not a bully, and that's if there's one thing that we think Mason McCormick hopefully will be at his core is a bully, right? Somebody that's going to move people against their will. James Daniels really isn't that guy in the run game.
Yeah, he's a little more finesse. I mean, it does fit well with kind of the wide zone principles that Arthur Smith brings, but it really seems like this team is planning on letting Daniels just walk because they shutting down extension talks. They draft McCormick, and then Omar Khan was asked about, hey, why'd you take 3 offensive linemen in the first 4 rounds? And he said, well, we got some guys next year. Don't know what the future's going to be. And kind of seems like their plan is basically to let Daniels walk. And, of course, Herberg's a free agent as well.
And let's just look at the right guard contracts around the league right now. Only right guard. I mean, James Daniels is and they might have over the cap might have some of these guys misclassified right, left, and all like that. But he is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's 10th. He's still the 10th highest paid right guard according to over the cap right now as we sit here today. So obviously you would have to probably increase that number. He's not going to sign, he's probably not going to want to sign a deal with an $8.833 million new money average at this point. He'd probably be looking more along the lines of at least 12, at this point. And the Steelers probably just don't want to invest their cash that way, especially on a player like him.
Is there a difference in payouts in left guard, right guard, the way there is with left tackle, right tackle, even though, of course, on the field, left tackles and right tackles are essentially equally as valuable?
Well, let's look at the left guard contracts right now. And what did I say? Daniels was the 10th?
10th at right guard.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Ezra Cleveland and Isaac Seumalo are both tied for 10th overall at $8 million. So
Daniels is above them.
It's fairly comparative.
Okay, so he's like the 19th or 17th highest paid guard left and right in the league right now.
I'd have to throw it in a spreadsheet real quick, but I think the big takeaway here is if you're a kick-ass guard, it don't matter what side you play on, you're gonna get paid. You know?
I just don't think Pittsburgh wants to pay that kind of money with how hot the market got with Dotson and Robert Hunt and others signing $16 million plus this offseason. All right, next question comes from Luis Cervantes, who says, favorite season covering the Steelers. What's been your favorite season to follow the team? That's a really good one. Trying to think off the top of my head, which was my, you've been doing this a bit longer than I have, Dave. Where's your head kind of go?
Oh, man. There's a point in where I have, in doing this, going all the way back to 2008, where a couple years into this, a little bit of your fandom leaves you in the trade-off of trying to be as objective as you can. And as part of a byproduct of that, at least to me, you almost become desensitized, I think, to, I'm being totally honest here. I mean, you almost just become, you just cover the team and you don't get so caught up in, oh man, that was a super exciting season to cover. You know what I'm saying? You see where I'm going with that?
I do. But there are years where it's just more fun. Obviously the years where they had more success were generally more fun. I mean, 2019 was interesting, but it was a crazy year for a bunch of reasons with Ben getting hurt and Rudolph and the whole Browns game saga and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if that was my favorite season ever.
I mean, a couple of those seasons with Antonio Brown and Ben and some. I mean,
I was thinking
back,
2017. That was a fun year for the offense.
Yeah, when Killer Bees going full force, and I mean, it was like every game recap, you're like, I can't, can you run out of superlatives to describe a play Antonio made or a throw Ben made or that. So yeah, maybe 2017.
Yeah, I think it'd be around there, somewhere in that era. The defense was less fun to watch. I mean, the Steelers have seesawed between, strong offense, weak defense, and strong defense, weak offense. And, right now they've been trying to work on the offense and build it up to the defense. But I'd probably say right around there is probably my, obviously the season ended in disappointment. 2016 was kind of fun, the playoff run, the last kind of real run that Pittsburgh had for Super Bowl. That was exciting as well, despite the AFC title game lost to the Patriots when guys getting hurt, Bell barely being available. But right around there probably be my answer. All right, next question will come from, let's see, AB. Speaking of AB, this is a chat. AB says, who is the Steelers quarterback in 2025? Why in any world would we consider trading our first-round pick next year for a receiver? Any why in any world? I think he just says, why in the world, basically, would they consider trading a first-round pick for a receiver next year? I'd do it because is your first-round pick going to be better than Brandon Ayuk or not? Yes, there's a cost you have to pay and still some unknown bringing in somebody like that, but the calculation is when you have Minkah Fitzpatrick in 2019, to reference that year again. Why trade for Minkah when you just lost Ben? Don't know his future. The trade worked out. Will Pittsburgh be picking highly enough to get a top-end quarterback in the first round? It's unlikely. They always pick in the 15 to 25 kind of range, and so you're not going to have a terrible season that's going to get you the second overall pick and kind of pull a Carolina Panthers. So that would be the rationale in terms of why you'd want to trade a first-round pick potentially for a wide receiver.
Yeah, could that player, whoever that player is, make a difference and put you over the top this year?
Do you think an Ayuk trade does that? Do you think an Ayuk trade?
I tell you, I think it significantly makes a difference in this offense if they did.
Are they Super Bowl contenders if they were to trade for Ayuk, regardless of compensation, assuming no players get traded back?
I will say this. They are playoff worthy at that point, and we all know you get in the tournament, anything can happen.
Do you think they're playoff worthy now?
I think they're borderline.
Okay, so you think it kind of pushes them into very likely to make playoffs if they trade for Ayuk?
Yes.
Okay, I got you. The question is, though, but it doesn't make you Super Bowl contenders. Is that trade worth it? You could also say you're not making the trade just for this year. You're making it for the long term, like Minkah as well.
Right, but it better impact you now.
Sure. And it would. I think regardless of how much it would impact them or what it would take them from and to, it would help them in a dramatic direction. All right, next question comes from Infinity, who says, were you surprised to hear Roman Wilson characterize Calvin Austin III as the leader of the wide receiver room? Zach Ghazzani putting it out that Pickens needs to pick it up. Seems there's always smoke around JP. That comment, I think, was grossly taken out of context. He had a lot of good things to say about George Pickens. I would not harp on too much. Ghazzani can be a very critical and honest guy as well. Had critiques for the whole group, Roman Wilson, etc. Besides Austin, he praised him consistently, but I wouldn't get caught up in that quote there. For Austin being the leader, I mean, it's who else is going to be the leader? I don't know if Pickens is that true rally the troops type of leader. He's talked about he's kind of more lead by example and just kind of people watch him, which is fine. Different leadership styles. So other than him, it's pretty wide open in terms of who the leader is, and Calvin Austin's a very hard worker.
Here's the thing about Calvin Austin so far. I mean, obviously we're not in that locker room. Don't talk to him, or anything like that. As much as the beat writers do on a weekly basis and all like that. But what limited amount that we have is pushed out through either post game or off season or whatnot. Not like that. Has there ever been a Calvin Austin interview where you've cringed and go, ooh, I wish he didn't say that, Sure. No. To me, the answer to that is no. And plus now, I mean, this is technically his third season in the NFL. He's been around. He is, like it or not, one of the, as far as guys that have been there, one of the more veteran guys. He understands the culture and all like that. So I wouldn't say it's a huge shock that Roman Wilson, said that about him.
Yeah, I think Austin has shown leadership traits. He's got a story. He was a walk-on at Memphis, right? I believe, light recruit, and so he's got a story, and I think battle-tested because of it. I had a conversation with him at the Senior Bowl coming out of Memphis, and it was a good guy to talk to. I was happy to be almost eye level with a player for once, with him at 5'8", me a little under 5'8". But yeah, I can certainly see the leadership traits in Calvin Austin. All right, next question will come from. Let's see what else we have here. Mike Adesso again. Everyone wants to trade Dan Moore, but who's going to be the top left tackle backup? Can't go in with Dylan Cook as the main backup. That seems crazy, and I'm a Cook believer. Also, I think Moore starts week 1. So we'll talk about that a lot, I'm sure, this summer, Dave, when we see Fautanu, and if we feel like Fautanu's going to win a starting job, and of course, Broderick Jones will be a starter. Where does that leave Dan Moore? I don't know. I think if Dylan Cook, I think you would trade Dan Moore because those young tackles played well, and Dylan Cook really showed you something, and so you're not going to trade him unless and until you have a good backup plan. So I think they're kind of intertwined. That if you trade Dan Moore, it says that Cook had a really good summer. We're talking about it, recognize it, and you feel comfortable making that move. I'm
with you there. I think the only way you get in a situation where a Dan Moore Jr. trade almost around the timing that we saw Kevin Dotson sent away last year, the only way that happens is if you come out of the preseason and training camp with, man, Dylan Cook, do you believe how well he's played, and visibly just better than Dan Moore, and he can play both spots. And if you come out of it arguably with all parties just agreeing that Dylan Cook is the better player, then at that point I think you obviously answer the phone and see what's out there. Look, Dan Moore Jr.'s got some price to him, because of the proven performance escalator and all like that. He's set to make $3.366 million as a base salary in 2024. You don't normally see this. We saw what happened with Dotson last year, right? I wrote an article several weeks ago. Kind of, similar, not same, but interesting situations that Dotson was in last year, kind of comparative to Dan Moore this year. So, if you come out of the preseason and man, there's no way you can't have Dylan Cook dressed for a game as your swing guy, then I think you do need to explore, what can we get for Dan Moore? I'm doing my Steelers deconstructing the roster series and assigning a arbitrary, granted, but a percentage chance that a player makes the 53-man roster week 1, considering also the possibility that they may trade for somebody from the outside or trade somebody away. What percentage would you give Dan Moore Jr. being a Steeler, regardless of starter or backup, active or not, in week 1 at Atlanta? To be the starter? Just on the roster. On the 53. Percentage of chance of Dan Moore being on the roster in week 1 against Atlanta. Yes. 97%. So you think a very small chance he were to get traded? Very extremely. I think it's all dependent on Dylan Cook. Okay. I think it's a little higher than that. Not dramatically so, but I think a little bit higher because I think Cook will impress. And if Moore, the reporting right now, we'll talk about it on the pod tomorrow, Dave, is that Dan Moore is going to compete with Fautanu at right tackle. And if he is, he ain't going to be the starting right tackle because he's not comfortable there. Fautanu's gotten some reps there. I think Fautanu's going to start at right tackle if it's truly those guys competing. Okay. That's my thought on it, at least. But we'll talk about that more on tomorrow's show. Tim Chase says, who is your undrafted free agent that makes the team and wows us fans? Dave, I'll let you answer. I think I know where you're going to go on this one. Yeah, being hard not to be excited of what the reports are going to be about Beanie Bishop moving forward. I think he's the most notable. Obviously, you got a small class. There's not many to talk about overall when it comes to this year's undrafted free agent class. So he is a guy that I'm excited to learn a lot about once training camp gets underway. Yeah, I think Bishop will be the consensus answer. I'll just mention at least a different name, and I'm not going to
say that he will be the guy to answer the question directly, but to give a different name. What about Jacoby Windman from Michigan State, who I thought made some plays out there? I think he had some off-the-field stuff. He was one of those guys that punched somebody in the tunnel in one of those skirmishes in one of his college football games. He's a guy, could he push a Mark Robinson for a number 5 inside linebacker spot? I think it's possible.
I think it's plausible, and I think it's definitely plausible for him to land on the practice squad.
Yeah, so that just, but again, you said it, 5 guys were brought in, so it's a very small list of names to talk about. I think John Rice Plumlee will do some kick returns. I mean, he's a good athlete, exciting player. Don't think he's going to be an NFL quarterback, but he's a fun athlete to watch on tape. And he could probably run around in some preseason games and make some plays that way. All right, let's see what other questions we have. About 20 minutes left, so be sure to get your questions in ASAP. Fellow Alex says, Vegas has the Steelers win total of 8 games. Can you see any scenario the Steelers don't win at least 8 games other than bad injury luck? Do you see any scenario where Pittsburgh has a 7-11 or 7-10? Losing my math here. 7-10 type season.
I think the only way that happens is if they get out of the chute in the first half of the season with some disasters, losing some games that they against opponents that, because you got that AFC North buzzsaw after the bye week and all like that. You got Kansas City, and you got some tough games later in this, Philadelphia and all like that. So that's going to be a tough run there. So you got to make sure that you win those games you're supposed to win in the first half of the season. So I think that would be the only way is, let's say you come out of the first, 4 games, 1-3 or something crazy like that. That would be the only way that obviously injuries are concerned any season. And I mean, we saw how this inside linebacker room got hit last year, but they still managed to get through that. They still managed to get through that quarterback situation that they had, and still made it to the tournament. So obviously injuries play a huge part in seasons with teams, but I think my biggest concern when it comes to them potentially being under 500 would be how they do in, let's say, the first quarter or first 5 games of the season.
I get the difficulty of the AFC North, the schedule in general, makes it a possibility, but when was the last time Pittsburgh won fewer than 8 games in a year? 2003, I believe. I mean, you could have had this question posed every year, and despite every circumstance, every issue, 2019, the last 2 years, 2013, when they go 0-4, they find a way to win at least 8 games. I'm not trying to tout he never had a losing season stat, but to answer the question, because that's basically what it's getting at, will Tomlin have that losing season? I know if you go 8-9 this year, it qualifies, but to win fewer than 8 games, Tomlin's never happened before. So I will say that it's hard to see that scenario with, I think, a healthy defense and improved quarterback play and better identity and philosophy and personnel to match. So tough to see.
But if it did happen, how would you envision the first 5 games of the season having gone?
Not great. I don't think it has to be. They could go 2-2 or 2-3 to start the year and still, I think, be under. It's still possible they would be under 8 wins because that back half of the schedule just looks so tough in the AFC North, and then against Philly, short week against Kansas City on Christmas. I mean, that's just difficult.
Okay.
But I mean, Pittsburgh, to their credit, has done a great job against the division, better than the other 3 teams have. But I think even if they got off to a decent start, I mean, if they go like 3-1 to start the year, it's really hard to see them, winning only 7 games. But even an average start could still swing poorly, as it almost did last year, dropping to 7-7. Next question comes from Luis again, or Luis again says, what do you guys think about the 18-game season? Love it or hate it? I've just kind of accepted it as being inevitable. It's just going to happen, and it really doesn't matter what I care, or no one cares about what I think or feel about that possibility.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's just inevitable. I do like evenness, though.
Yeah, 17 has been awkward.
I do like even kind of balance things in all aspects of my life, and that includes my football schedules.
Yeah. Can we roll back to 16? I only dislike 18 because of the they'll go to 2 preseason games, and I hate robbing these guys at the bottom of the depth chart trying to fight for a spot. I know practice squad spots have expanded, and rosters likely will expand on an 18-game season, but just fewer opportunities for those guys to get reps is just really unfair to them. All right, next question will come from, if I can find it, AB says, the Steelers have made a trade in August or September in every season since 2015. Who gets dealt and or who would they target leading into the season? I'll say they trade for a receiver. I don't know who it's going to be. I'm not saying it's going to be Ayuk. I think they will add a receiver in some capacity via trade before week 1, likely and hopefully to be a starter opposite George Pickens.
Yeah, I think I'm on record several weeks ago as saying, man, somehow, some way, some whoever, it might not be as sexy as of a wide receiver as the big 4 names that we've talked about most of the offseason here, but it feels like if they did do a deal, right before the start of the season, it would be for a wide receiver.
Will anyone get traded away?
I mean, I don't think you can discount it completely. You have guys sometimes step up, and I don't think it's out of the question. It's hard to sit here and name, but we already went over what it would take for Dan Moore to be in such a situation like that. So when it comes to offensive linemen, it feels like it. I mean, could you get in a situation with a Nate Herbig for whatever reason? It doesn't feel like it because it feels like he's your next best option at center there. Oh, man.
Mention Leal. A trade away could be a Kendrick Green where it's just a guy that busted out in Pittsburgh. You deal him for a conditional late-round pick.
Right. Could be a situation like that. I mean, could your linebacker room be close enough that maybe you dealt a guy like Mark Robinson away for a 7th-round draft pick or something like that, you know?
Yeah, I'll say they trade somebody away. I don't know who, and it probably wouldn't be for a lot of value. It certainly would not be for DeMarvin Leal, who I think is a prime candidate to be in that position, but that would still be a trading somebody away. So I think, Omar Khan's been busy at both kind of cut-down deadlines as GM, right? He traded for, Malik Reed and Jesse Davis in his first year in the summer of 2022, and then last year was active trading away, Dotson and Kendrick Green. So maybe get one of each, an acquisition and a departure this time around.
What did I write? What was that name of that article I wrote the other day about the Steelers in trades after acquisition or adding to the roster after mandatory minicamp dating back to 2012 was it?
Pulling up the article on screen now for you guys.
What's the title of that article?
History indicates more additions on the way for Steelers post-mandatory minicamp, and you have a handy chart here showing all of the now these are total acquisitions, not just trades, but there are still many trades that litter this list.
Right. And what did I have in there about the number of trades that they've made since 2012? What was it, like 11. 11. So, look, regardless of how they go about adding to the roster at this point beyond mandatory minicamp, you've only had one season, 2019, where not one player was added to the roster who wasn't with the team when they broke mandatory minicamp. So on average, you look at this and you say, at least one more guy is coming to this roster, and really more realistically, probably two moving on through the summer here. And I don't think we're going to be too far off of that this year.
And also to even make that more specific, a player has been added in the month of August or later who made the 53 every year since 2012. So even discounting post-minicamp in June and all of July, August, September have had at least one addition.
Right. And look, June, as I wrote about several weeks ago, is just not historically in the NFL, at least over the last 15 years. It's not a month that's known for notable trades around the NFL, period.
Yeah, but they did sign Larry Ogunjobi, as you have noted here in June, and Trey Turner after DeCastro's career was basically going to be done. So gotten some of that before, but yeah, I think there'll be some more movement along the way. Ronald Hall says, is Connor Heyward on the bubble to make this team? I don't know if I think some kind of view him as a lock. I wouldn't go that far, but I think he's inside looking out right now.
I would, where I sit right now, I'd be highly surprised if he doesn't make it. I'll tell you that.
Just want to see how he fits. Is he a fullback? Is he a tight end in this offense? Inline blocker? I think we'll make it.
He's good on special teams. Got great hands. You can do so much with him. Man, what's the next step down from he's a lock? What's the next very incremental step down from being a lock? Because that's
lock.
Probably that's probably where I'd put him.
Okay, in my deconstructing the roster, I have it goes from bubble to inside looking out to near locks to locks, and so that's sounds like he's a near lock for you. I would say probably more inside looking out. I forget where I put him on my list, but you'll see that here in the coming days. Next question, more of a comment from DOKDIE. I love Kim Heyward, but I don't know what a fair extension would be at 36 years old. D lineman who did get hurt last year. Love the player and will go down a Steelers Hall of Fame, possibly NFL Hall of Fame. And so he's just kind of wondering. You'd written about it, I think, at large yesterday. I think next couple of months, really, I don't know, not even a couple of months, but until camp's going to be really interesting with Freiermuth, with Heyward and Harris. What's going to happen with those guys? I mean, those are some big storylines to watch for.
Yeah, and as far as what realistically is fair for both sides when it comes to Heyward, either a no new money extension a la the Troy Polamalu, Heath Miller stuff several years ago, or at best, I mean, and you're probably really stretching, and I know several in the chat will even push back on this. Maybe you give him an additional $2 million more. Now, obviously, as part of any extension that you do with him, you're probably going to lower his cap number significantly because you're probably going to add 2 years onto the deal. You're going to take a chunk of what he's due in 2024 and turn it into a signing bonus, and then yada yada. But I think realistically, at his age, you try your best to do a no new money in 2024 extension. You try to set up the structure in 2025 and 2026 with fair but modest roster bonuses so they can act as calendar triggers with him. At least he knows by March of 2025 and 2026 whether or not he's going to be on the roster and can get a jump on the market if he need be. And on top of it, I think you try to do salaries around, I don't know, 13 to 15 million in those 2 additional years, something along those lines. I think that's ideally the way this thing should go with him.
I agree. Will it happen? We will see, and certainly be discussing it. Dave, let's fly through a couple of these last questions. We've got some hockey on. I think we all want to watch Game 7. Mark Cunningham, any updates on Holcomb's recovery? Last heard from Tomlin. It seems like he will be practicing in some capacity day 1 at training camp, avoid pup. So don't know exact timetables, but a lot more optimism now than we had 3-4 months ago.
I would just say when it comes to Holcomb, just don't be shocked if he opens camp on the active PUP, just to make sure they get him out there running around and make sure he's okay. And then maybe, even immediately, 5-6 days into training camp, take him off active PUP and then let him begin practicing and all like that. Just don't be shocked if that happens.
I think you had said that Omar Khan had mentioned he's got a doctor's appointment late July, right before camp. I assume probably going to be a big determination on his status to begin training camp. Mike Adesso, would a trade for Ayuk or another receiver in the $30 million range negate a Pickens contract next year? I just want to say quickly, as much as focus on Ayuk, and we talked about this breathlessly, but I still think Deebo Samuel could be in play. If they get an extension done with Ayuk San Francisco, then all the trade conversations shift from Ayuk directly to Deebo. I don't know if I'm saying it's going to happen, but I think we should talk about Deebo Samuel a bit more than we have.
Yeah, I think somewhere on the site I have of since in the 12 articles that I've written myself on, and the site's probably got about 80 on Ayuk and all like that. If they get Ayuk signed, you do have to wonder maybe if Deebo comes into play at that point. And in short of those two wide receivers in San Francisco, really, where I'm at right now, Deebo might be the likeliest of the two to be dealt.
Yeah, certainly if they do it with Ayuk, then Samuel gets open. But anyway, to answer Mike's question, if they trade for him, does that negate a Pickens contract? I'll say no, because if they're trading for Ayuk and paying him $30 million, then all the rules are broken. Everything we know just flips on its head. And so I wouldn't help the odds, obviously, with Pickens, but I don't think it would negate the odds. I
don't think you can unequivocally say in no way, shape, or form would they still not do a deal with Pickens, but it would make it a lot more challenging, to have, because Pickens, if he has the kind of season that you would think and hope that he's going to have in 2024, he's gonna want to try to come close to resetting the market.
Yeah, I'm here. I hear you there. Patrick Donovan, 2 quick questions. Do y'all think Leal's been put in a tough spot, sort of like Sean Davis with not being put at a certain position? Yeah, I don't think the team did him favors his rookie year, even the start of the summer last year, but he's got to just play better. He apparently wasn't in great shape last year. He's got to mature, so I think he certainly has a lot of blame on himself and not just the team.
Big summer for him.
Yep, no question. Also, Patrick says, if one of the quarterbacks is playing well by the middle of the season, do you think the Steelers should break precedent and sign one of them long term? I say no.
I say no, and I think in so many words, Omar said in that interview the other day on 93.7 that's one precedent that they're not breaking. Once the season gets underway, they're not negotiating any contracts until after the season's over.
Yeah, I like that approach, and a guy's playing well midway through the season. That warm can turn very quickly, as we've seen before. I'll let the entire season play out, have all the data possible, all the information I can collect before having to make that decision. That's my approach. What else do we have? Anything else? Is there any chance Chris Godwin could be a possibility? I don't see it. I think they want to retain those weapons for Baker.
I feel the same way, and he is scheduled to earn $18.5 million in 2024. And when was his roster? They already paid him $1.5 million roster bonus in March on top of it. So they've got $1.5 invested in him already this offseason. His contract voids after 2024. So you would have to turn around and give him a contract as well, too. It all feels real messy when it comes to him.
Yeah, Mike Adesso, could any crazy position changes be in order, like Kendrick Green at fullback? That's a good thought. He says Mark Robinson at fullback. I don't know. I hadn't thought about it that much so far, to be honest with you, but we'll certainly report it if it occurs. Jared, thanks for the Q&A. Hope the piano lessons are going well, Alex. We're hanging in there. We're clanging the keys along, so thank you, Jared. Appreciate that. Let's see, anything else Patrick had said about when they go 18 games, do you think the number of rounds in the draft increases? Interesting philosophical question, just kind of overall. I think it'll stay at 7, though.
I do as well, too, and I think now with the old NIL, and I think we saw it with this class, man.
Yeah.
It wasn't,
The depth was not there.
Yeah, it's lacking depth, and I suppose you could do it and add however many rounds and make them be 2-minute rounds, and that way you eliminate the bidding for the unrestricted guys or something like that. I don't think I'd be opposed to it, something like that.
Yeah, it's a deeper conversation to be had, but the undrafted market's kind of gotten pretty crazy with these guys making almost more than draft picks, 7th rounders, and so one way to potentially curtail that would be to add, say, an 8th round, and if rosters expand as the season expands, that's an extra game. You could argue that. So there's actually some good arguments to be made for that. Mm-hmm. I still think it'll stay at 7, but I think honestly what could drive it more than 18 games is, as I mentioned, kind of the undrafted free agent market going pretty crazy. Just guys getting a ton of money, and that may actually push the teams to finally put a stop and say, we got to stop spending $200,000 on this guy. We're going to go draft him instead. Last question, I think if we have one, Mike, are you surprised they have not signed one UFL guy so far? I thought they would have signed one from those roster spots that opened up. Too. But we'll see. I guess somebody still could. Still some names out there. Some former Steelers, Hakeem Butler, Anthony McFarland, Carlos Davis. I don't expect any of them to come back. Davis would be interesting, but we will keep you posted.
Yep.
All right. Will I be at Latrobe training camp this year? Yes, I will, Joey. I'll be there for all 16 practices. I think tickets go on sale maybe tomorrow. I think tomorrow at noon they go on sale, 11 a.m. What about James Washington coming back? We got to mention that on the show tomorrow, Dave, on James Washington, his NFL attempted comeback. Any interest in bringing him back to Pittsburgh?
None, zero.
I had a brief thought about, I could kind of see that, more of an outside guy, but if it doesn't move the needle at this point, then don't add the guy, is kind of my thought, and Washington would not be a needle mover. So, we will wrap things up, go watch some hockey. Appreciate you guys being here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, be a replay, archive version of this on the channel and on SteelersDepot.com. Dave, thank you for being here as always. Enjoy the game.
Thank you for moderating this in the excellent fashion that you do, and thank you to all of you who decided to show up tonight, and some great questions tonight. Peace and love. Have a great week.
Yeah, echo that. Great questions. Thank you guys so much for being here, and we'll talk to you soon.